Why should you look to the Falcons, Packers, and Commanders for some of your best deep sleepers and flex plays this week? It's time to break it down as we look at our flexes, our sleepers, and our picks of the week to close week 10, only on Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm reading about NFL and fantasy for sportingnews.com, as well as betting. And you're my co-host, Michelle.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Michelle Magdziuk, researcher at NFL Network and fantasy analyst for NFL.com.
All right, it's time to close the week. It's been a long week. That game felt very long last night, but it was okay if you had Dante Foreman, and that's the person we like the most in the game, and he came through. So you can't complain about that. It was a win, and they were front-running, so Dante Foreman, of course, showed up in a good matchup. So good stuff there. You're off to a start there, but you might be looking at some flex plays, some sleepers that you want to get those type of results from this weekend. We'll break that down for you on today's show as we kind of do a mashup of all those things that you might be looking at to make those tough decisions. And we'll also look at our picks of the week. We'll each go 3 each on all of these. So we'll break it down for you guys that we haven't necessarily talked about as much earlier in the week. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, and you definitely need to get in on the action here because, look, you can get a lot of money and multiply it up to $100. You'll get a first deposit matchup. If you just go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code all lowercase LockedOnNFL, easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports, only at PrizePicks. And stay tuned for our PrizePicks picks of the week. Now, Michelle, let's jump right in. Who are your 3 favorite flex plays? These are guys on the fringe, maybe, of starting in particular leagues at running back, wide receiver, tight end.
Yeah, I have all wide receivers, and my first one's probably the most obvious. It's Christian Kirk. I talked about him yesterday against the 49ers. He didn't have a good week in week 8 before their bye, just 8.6 fantasy points in PPR. But prior to that week, it was always 14 plus points per game from weeks 2 through 7. And I just love this matchup he has against the 49ers, against Isaiah Oliver, the slot wide receiver, the slot corner for the 49ers. He's terrible. And the 49ers have forced a tight window throw in the slot just 6.4% of the time. This year, it's the lowest in the NFL among all defenses. Like, this is such a fire spot for Kirk this week. Make sure he's in your lineups. And then Gabe Davis, people might be considering sitting him this week after a very disappointing week 9, right? He did absolutely nothing, but he's at home. And when he's at home, he does really well. He's played 5 home games so far this year. In 4 of them, it's been 21 points, 15, 22 points, and 23 points, like including week 8, his last home game. We got to remember week 9 was terrible, but just in week 8, 2 weeks ago, it was 12 targets, 9 receptions, 87 yards, and a touchdown. So I'm not just going to sit him because of the disaster of last week. I get his floor is super low, but at home, the Bills offense is so much better. And I'm starting Gabe Davis this week. And then last up is Jahan Dotson. Listen, this last 3 weeks, he's been getting the targets. These last 2 weeks, he's been averaging nearly 21 fantasy points per game because he's got a touchdown in back-to-back weeks. He leads the Commanders with 12 receptions, 177 yards on those 2 touchdowns over these last 2 weeks. Curtis Samuel has been dealing with a toe injury and hasn't been in. Maybe that is giving Dotson more work here. And if Samuel's back, maybe that goes down a little bit, but I'm not worried about it. I think Dotson is extremely talented, and they're finally starting to use him like they said they would. The Seahawks are allowing the 10th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers this season. So I like this matchup for him. I like his usage, and I'm making sure that Dotson is in my lineups this week. I'm not going to be scared to start him anymore.
Yeah, that matchup is good. If they can move him inside at times, that'll help in this one. I just look at the Seahawks. I mean, they have one good corner. The rest of their secondary has really struggled. So I love Dotson. I think Gabe Davis you put in just for the upside every week, right? He's a kind of flex play that you could win a game with. He can hurt you sometimes in weeks, but he could also explode and carry your team. So that is something you have to expect with a lot of players. And I'll have one of those guys that I mentioned as well. Christian Kirk, yeah, we love him this week. And yeah, you're good in any format you use him. Now, we look at a good matchup here in Green Bay, and the Steelers running game, red hot. They really looked great against the Titans. And part of it is their blocking got better. Broderick Jones was in there. So the rookie opened things up here for Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris in a tough matchup against the Titans. The Packers have been a very favorable matchup for running backs. You look at Warren and Harris, I think they've found the right combination to use these guys in the right spots, good coaching to adjust that, right, and get more out of them. So I think you'll see more offensive upside in general coming from the Steelers, but they're still going to win with defense and the running game, right? That's where Mike Tomlin wants to win most of these games. That's part of why you don't see them necessarily throwing around and not trusting Kenny Pickett, because they know they can win games like this. And Jordan Love's coming to town. I think Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris, I think you could see a game very similar to what they did against the Titans, right? A lot of running there, a lot of Deontay Johnson, safe things happening. And I like the Steelers actually in this close game to really pull away. So I love Warren this week playing off Harris. Then I look at Rashid Shaheed. He's a little bit like Gabe Davis, but he plays a little bit more inside. And you look at the Vikings, they've struggled there. They did have a couple interceptions from the slot against Brock Purdy in that game there a couple weeks ago. But look, they still struggle in that inside coverage. Shaheed is a speed guy. They're playing on a fast surface there in Minnesota. And I like Chris Olave and Shaheed. I like the passing game is getting compressed a little bit to these two guys. They don't throw too much to Juwan Johnson. Michael Thomas put up a 0 last week, so that's good news here for Shaheed. So he's like Gabe Davis. You're just going to have to accept some of these lower games, but he's going to end up in the end, when you look at the numbers, it's going to be wide receiver 3 just because of some of the big games. Now, finally, Demario Douglas, he's not a high upside play necessarily, but I think he could get there. And keep in mind that Josh Downs on the other side is hurt. So I think Demario Douglas could be that type. I don't think he's as fast or as explosive, but they trust him more. And Juju Smith-Schuster is still only getting limited snaps here. So a lot of things to look at here with this group. And look, I like the Patriots to move the ball well. And Kenny Moore is the Colts' best corner. He was pretty good last week, and they made some plays. But I think him playing on the outside is going to help Demario Douglas potentially on the inside.
Yeah, I wanted Demario Douglas to do more last week against the Commanders. It just felt like Mac Jones really has nobody now without Kendrick Bourne. You could see that. It's like, but he is getting the targets, so he should be better. But also, he's a late round rookie, so maybe he's not as talented as they need him to be right now. But he is in a perfect opportunity to get the work. Rashid Shaheed, like you said, he just needs those. He doesn't get nearly as many targets as Gabe Davis in his big games, but he just needs that one big play and he'll be worth it. And Jaylen Warren, you're right. Like the Steelers offense is looking better, I can't say they're looking good, but they're looking better as of late and they're getting the running game going. And Jaylen Warren is definitely the more explosive back between Najee and him, but also at the same time, like, they have their clear roles, right? Najee's much better up the middle. Warren, get him into space, and he's much better then on the outside. So I think they're utilizing them in that way. And we saw Warren grab a touchdown last week. I definitely think that could happen again this week.
Yeah, I think this is a good way to look at it. And this are people clamoring for, hey, Warren should be over Harris. But if they're both playing like this, they're helping both become fantasy assets. And that's ultimately what we want is more viable fantasy football assets. So I love Warren there. Now we'll get into
Warren can't run up the middle, so people need to stop saying that about Najee and Warren. Like,
well,
just watch
just
Warren. He cannot run up the middle. He's too little.
Yeah, and sometimes, look, you don't want that, right? I mean, Ezekiel Elliott helped Tony Pollard, right?
Yeah.
They were situations where he could give him a breather and keep him fresh legs, and you've seen that when they work in other backs again with the Chargers. That seems to help Austin Eckler as well. So sometimes you need these other backs to take pressure off the other guy, and not to the degree of one guy we'll talk about in our deep sleepers, unfortunately, or fortunately, if you have them on your team. We'll do that in our next segment. Before we do that, we got to hear from a couple of our sponsors. All right, this episode, Locked On Fantasy Football, it is a PrizePicks Friday, and we will have the picks there. And PrizePicks is the easiest way to play daily fantasy sports. It's really you want to get in on it now before it's too late, because look, the season is already into double digits and you want to enjoy it in the NFL. We know the NBA is just tipped off here as well, and we got other sports that you can look at there at PrizePicks. But looking here, I mean, you really can't go wrong going to PrizePicks. I mean, you just know that you're going to have a great experience, and it's a good way to play DFS and get involved and keep it simple, right? You just pick 2 to 6 players and you look at their stat projections. All you have to do is say, are they going to go more or less than those projections? And then you can win 25 times your money. That's right. You can turn $10 into $250 just like that. Easy gameplay, all that good stuff that you can expect there. It's the most fun you can have, winning 25 times your money. And you just place your entry and you can do that in minutes here. So it's great here with PrizePicks. This is why you get the best experience playing this type of environment on DFS. So check it out, PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code LockedOnNFL for first deposit match up to $100. Check it out. Again, it's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code LockedOnNFL for first deposit match up to $100. And stay tuned here for our picks at the end of the show. Now, Michelle, we spent a lot of time together here on the show, going back and forth, fired up here, looking for starts and sits. Well, look, I'm thankful for all the connections that we have here and in our life in general, and we want to make sure we're taking care of ourselves. And really, you can't beat getting the medicines you need to get through what you need with JaseMedical.com. You can receive a 12-month supply on your favorite daily medication and needed. So check it out. Use the promo code locked on at checkout for a discount as well. Look, a verified customer had this to say about Jase. I'm thankful to the service. Supply chains cause me to put pills in half and just try to survive that way. I ordered my order of daily meds that you needed with a year supply. And you can check it out only at Jase Medical. So it's very easy. They're going to make sure that you're covered well with your costs. If you or someone you love needs some peace of mind getting a year supply of their daily med, just go to jasemedical.com and check it out. Check it out with the promo code locked on for $20 off your purchase. Again, go to Jase Medical. That's JASE Medical. Use the promo code locked on for $20 off your first purchase. All right, Michelle, we will continue with our deep sleepers here. So these are players that maybe deeper leagues you could look at flex, or just maybe if you're hurting on bye weeks. We know there's a ton of wide receivers off. You might be hurting at running back as well. These are the directions you can go in. So, Michelle, let's start with your 3 deep sleepers. Unfortunately, I don't want the first guy to have a big game. I don't mind him to have a complimentary game. I just don't want him to get all the goal line carries from Arthur Smith.
Oh, I've never wanted to be more wrong about a pick in my life. Like, I hope Tyler Algier stinks, right? But he's one of my sleepers this week. Tyler Algier against the Cardinals. It's a fantastic matchup. The Cardinals are allowing the 3rd most fantasy points per game to running backs this year. And Arthur Smith's obsessed with him. That's what it comes down to. Like, at the end, that final drive last game, I know Tyler Algier was looking good, but you know who was looking good prior to that on that final drive? It was Bijan Robinson. He was killing it on that final drive. So you can't say he's just going with the hot hand, right? It's not like, oh, well, we put in Algier and he was looking so good, we took him out. You took out Bijan when he was looking so good. It drives me crazy. But anyways, like, Tyler Algier most of this year has done absolutely nothing for fantasy. I mean, almost always 6 fantasy points and under, right? So he's not doing much. But last week, 11 points. 2 weeks prior, when Bijan was like not playing at all, it was 14 points. I do think in this matchup, he'll probably steal a touchdown because, again, Arthur Smith. So you can play him this week if you need an RB2 or a flex play there. And then my other 2 sleepers are wide receivers. Jayden Reed, rookie wide receiver for the Packers against the Steelers. The Steelers have been very suspect to wide receivers this year, allowing the 4th most yards per reception to wide receivers, 5th most fantasy points per game to the position. And the thing is, I think Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, they're going to see a lot of Joey Porter Jr., the rookie corner for the Steelers, that he just shut down DeAndre Hopkins last week. He's been playing really, really well every time he gets an opportunity. But PFF has that Jayden Reed will see a lot of old man Patrick Peterson this year. He cannot cover anyone right now. It's been a bad stretch for him. He is not playing well at his old age. So Jayden Reed, he's not seeing a ton of targets, but I do think in this game he can get some big receptions, right? Like I don't expect him to catch 7-8 balls. That's not the game I foresee, but I do think it could be 4 catches for 80 yards and possibly a touchdown. That's the kind of game I see for him here. And then my last sleeper is Brandon Powell, the wide receiver for the Vikings up against the Saints. Now, a lot of this is on if KJ Osborne is out or not, right? He did put in a limited practice on Thursday, but it looked like a pretty brutal concussion he suffered last week. So I would be pretty shocked if he did play, but just keep an eye on that. Justin Jefferson doesn't look like he's coming back to play this week. And Powell has been playing a lot of snaps over the last 4 weeks. And especially like last week, he played a season high 70% of offensive snaps. Hasn't turned into a lot of targets. So that's why I think he'll get more if Osborne's out. But I really love this matchup for him. You know, Lattimore and Adebo on the outside for the Saints. They're really good, but Brandon Powell's the slot wide receiver. And the Saints are allowing the 3rd most receiving yards in the NFL to wide receivers out of the slot this year. So I expect Powell to have a few receptions, maybe get into the end zone. It's not a super high upside play, but I do think he's a very cheap option and probably DFS. So looking to play him there, a little bit riskier in your redraft leagues, but DFS, I'm definitely eyeing him in as a cheap option.
Yeah, this seems to be like the slot machine week because I've looked at the slot matchups. We talked about Christian Kirk. He has a good matchup. We talked about Rashid Shaheed when he lines up outside or inside. Good stuff. Demario Douglas, potential, right? You look at Jayden Reed, yeah, good spot. Brandon Powell, I'm going to bring up one more guy in our last segment. I'm going to save him for the PrizePicks that might have the best matchup of the week and also might be the best slot receiver right now in the NFL. So I'll save that one. But speaking of slot, everyone is going to Tyler Boyd, right? That's been the pivot that we look at a lot with T. Higgins, unlikely to play. It looks better for Jamar Chase because he got a limited practice with back injury, but all reports indicate that T. Higgins is going to miss another game, and he did that before, right? Who stepped up most was Trenton Irwin. He had 10 targets there. That was the game in Arizona where Jamar Chase went off. But Trenton Irwin was involved. I mean, he had 10 targets. So that's significant here. I think maybe we're just looking at Tyler Boyd. Okay, he's the next man up, but that's not how it works, right? They want to still keep Tyler Boyd where he's at. I think if you want to go a little deeper, you could look at the tight ends, and you look at the Texans. They gave up 2 touchdowns to K. Dotson, so maybe you'll get lucky with Irv Smith if you're really hurting there. But I like Trent Irwin. I think he's going to be involved. It's not necessarily the easiest matchup on the outside, but he's a good receiver. I think Joe Burrow trusts him a little bit more than Andre Savas and some of these other guys that are on the roster. Keep in mind, Savas is a rookie, so Irwin's got some experience in this offense, and he'd be the next guy up sliding in, right? Boyd is still going to be on the field with Chase, but you'll see Irwin in there. So he's a deep sleeper. That's what we're doing here. These are kind of dart throw plays, but if you're really hurting at wide receiver with those issues, and you don't want to use a lot of waiver capital and didn't spend anything, you just want to make this decision last minute, go with Trent Irwin. Now, Wan'Dale Robinson, similar boat. Now, everyone's going to say, oh, it's Tommy DeVito. Okay, we're not going to play him. But who had the best chemistry with Tommy DeVito last week? It was definitely Wan'Dale Robinson. He found the end zone a couple weeks ago with Tyrod Taylor. He put up a very good stat line. So, look, you can dump on these guys, DeVito and Tyson Bagent and whoever, but they still are going to get the ball to people at times, right? They are competent at least to get 150, 200 passing yards. Where most of those are going to go, Saquon Barkley and checkdowns, probably Wan'Dale Robinson being the beneficiary late. And what you want is the Cowboys to get so far ahead that they do not care about what Tommy DeVito does here. And I think that could definitely happen here with Wan'Dale Robinson. And then finally, last week, there was a big reason why the Ravens got Odell Beckham Jr. involved. First of all, he whined. Second of all, he also was celebrating his birthday. And then he also went to Kim Kardashian's birthday party. So there are all these things going on. Odell wanted to be in the spotlight. So they said, okay, this game, we're blowing him out. Tyler Huntley's in the game. Here you go. Here's your first touchdown as a Raven. This week, he's getting a nice revenge game against the Browns. And he's going to be fired up. They know what makes Odell tick, right? He's seeing more routes. He's seeing more targets of late. I think he's, when you look at the snap share, I think he's a little bit separating from Nelson Aguilar and Rashad Bateman behind Zay Flowers. So They're feeling more comfortable using him. This is a deep dart throw again. Probably comes down to a big play or a touchdown or both on the same play with Odell Beckham Jr. But if you're really hurting at wide receiver, you can do a lot worse. Because I see a lot of people saying, okay, go look at Cedric Tillman. But if I'm going to go for a random number 2 receiver in this game, it's OBJ and not Cedric Tillman.
Yeah, it would take a lot for me to start Odell Beckham Jr. But I would rather start him than Cedric Tillman. I'll give you that. I would rather go with Brandon Powell, though. I will say that, or Jaden Reed. So it would take a ton there for me to go with OBJ. I like the Irwin call. The thing with the Giants, Tommy DeVito, I don't know if they score a touchdown, but that you don't have to score a touchdown to be a good, especially if you're in a PPR league. I think that's the only way I'd play Wandell because I'm not expecting touchdowns in this Giants game at all. But if you're in a full PPR league, someone has there's not going to be 0 completions in this game, right? Like the team's going to at least put up 150 somewhere around their yards. Like that would be a really, really atrocious game. They're going to do something and someone has to catch the ball. So I agree. Like they don't need to score points for someone to be relevant in fantasy in this game in a PPR league. So that's a way that I would play Robinson there if I was considering that in a full PPR league. In our last segment, we're going to get to our prize picks of the week. I again just focus on those receivers. I don't know why I feel better about the receiving numbers this week, but we'll get to those. But I want to talk about another one of our sponsors. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by BetterHelp. Do you ever find that just as you're trying to fall asleep, your brain suddenly won't stop talking? Do your thoughts start racing right before bed or at other inopportune moments? It turns out one great way to make those racing thoughts go away is to talk them through. Therapy gives you a place to do that so you can get out of your negative thought cycles and find some mental and emotional peace. I definitely know that therapy has helped for me with this situation. I used to always struggle to fall asleep, and I am the biggest advocate for therapy. Nothing has helped me more with my anxiety and just peace of mind, like they said, and just helping me sleep and fall asleep at night as well. So this is so true. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. Get a break from your thoughts with BetterHelp. All you have to do is visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Give online therapy a try at betterhelp.com/lockedon and get on your way to your best self. All right, Vinny, it's time to end this week with our prize picks of the week. I feel like we're pretty good at these overall. I would have to go back and tally them up, but I feel like we have a pretty good hit rate on these this year. They've been fun to do. So give me your 3 top prize picks of the week.
Yeah, I'm going to start with my last one because we did have that conversation about slot receivers dominating. The best slot matchup of the week belongs to Amon-Ra St. Brown, and the number is extremely high, 88.5 receiving yards on PrizePicks. I'm going more, and there's a lot of reasons for this. It's just Sir Taylor. That's how you say his name, the slot receiver or the slot corner for the Chargers. They're really not good against receivers anywhere, but particularly bad inside. CeeDee Lamb destroyed them. Keep that in mind. I mean, very similar type there that can work inside and dominate and going to see a lot of targets. And do consider, I should say, that Amon-Ra is from Southern California. He's a Los Angeles product. He went to USC. Jared Goff used to play in Los Angeles. So they're going to be very comfortable playing in this environment. It's going to feel like a home game against the Chargers. There's going to be a lot of points back and forth between Goff and Justin Herbert. Amon-Ra is going to get targeted a ton in this game. He has a great matchup. He's going absolutely off. So 88.5, even though it's high, I think that total is low, Michelle. So I'm going easily more. So that's the one I'm most excited about. Now, the second one I really like is Breece Hall, and I have him taking a combined total look at him. So I do like his combined total here because, look, I don't trust him necessarily to get enough rushes. I don't trust him to get enough receptions to have the single prop, right? I like them all coming together here. So I think he has a big game here. Raiders' run defense is atrocious, so he could get it all on the ground, right? But he could also explode for a 50-yard catch and all that. So you're looking at his number. It's pretty darn good. It's actually lower than Amon-Ra's total number here. So Amon-Ra is 88.5 receiving. This is 86.5 combined rushing and receiving here for Breece Hall. So I'm going more on this one as well. I think Breece Hall has a massive game. He's the only way the Jets can stop their losing streak and win this game. It's a one-game losing streak, but they need to win it badly against the Raiders on Sunday night and get back on track. Now, Kyler Murray is the other one. Now, the question is, how much is Kyler going to run and test his knee in the game back? But the number is just so low for a mobile quarterback at 26.5. Yeah, he's going to run around a little bit, folks. I mean, I think he also wants to come out there and prove that he's healthy, right? 26.5, he can do that in like 2 runs, and he's good. Like, just move around a little bit, and he can blow through the Falcons' defense. And keep in mind, the Falcons' defense built a lot like the Saints. They have the same scheme, essentially. So what does that do? It opens up things to run, and the Saints have given up a ton of rushing yards to quarterbacks, and this is a good matchup. So if you find a thing out there with Josh Dobbs and the rushing, I'm going to go for it hard this week. But Kyler, I think, also gets it done against the Falcons. Again, it's at home. He's got to wake up this team. They're dead. Here's some energy coming to life with Kyler Murray. And that number, you'll never see it again. I'm just going to say, if Kyler Murray is healthy, you're never going to see 26.5. So I'm going more on the rushing yards.
And he's been talking about how he's trusting his knee, right? Like this is a big thing to overcome. And he doesn't seem like this is a struggle for him right now with trusting the knee. He's not even going to wear a brace, which is huge, right? So I do think he's going to have a little something to prove. Like, see, guys, I'm fine. Like, I do think he's going to want to prove that to us and like run around. Not too much, like don't get yourself hurt. But also we saw Dobbs put up over 60 rushing yards against the Falcons defense. So I do like that call. Breece Hall, I think the only way to place a wager on his totals here is to go rushing and receiving, because you never know, is he going to break off a long run or is he going to break off a long reception? Normally it's one of them in a game, but you don't know which one. So I love combining those two, and Amon-Ra is just one of the best wide receivers in the league. So yeah, more than is always feels good. My 3, I'm doing a combined here with 2 guys that I like this week. It's Jahan Dotson plus DK Metcalf. They play against each other, Seahawks versus the Commanders, but it's combined more than 0.5 total rushing plus receiving touchdowns. So just one of these guys has to get into the end zone this week to hit that. Dotson has scored a touchdown in back-to-back games. And then Metcalf hasn't been scoring too much this year, but we know in his career he's been a very good touchdown scorer. And the Commanders have allowed the second most receiving touchdowns to wide receiver this year. All I'm going to say is if rookie Emmanuel Forbes, who is like smaller than me, right? He is so tiny. If he lines up against the monster of a man, DK Metcalf, which he will, like there's going to be times he will, Geno Smith has to target DK Metcalf deep every single time that happens, because they call it a 50-50 ball. That would be a 99-1 ball. Like DK Metcalf is coming down with that against Emmanuel Forbes. So I'm definitely taking that total there. I think at least one of those guys comes down with a touchdown. And then Gabe Davis, more than 37.5 receiving yards. I talked about his home road splits yesterday. I just went through his home numbers earlier in this episode, but his receiving yards at home, 92, 61, 100. There was a 21-yard game in there, and then 87. So he's been smashing this. It's not even been close for 4 of the 5 games. I'm taking the more than 37.5 there at home. And then lastly, another Bills receiver, but tight end, Dalton Kincaid, more than 45.5 receiving yards. It doesn't seem like his number is ever pushing up on PrizePicks. They just keep keeping it real low, right? If you've been going on PrizePicks and putting money down on the more than Dalton Kincaid's receiving yards every week, you've been winning every time. Since Dawson Knox has been out, these are Kincaid's numbers: 75, 65, 81. And it's not like this is a hard matchup. The Broncos are allowing the very most receiving yards to the tight end position this year. So it's actually the best matchup for tight ends in terms of receiving yards. So I don't really know why this number is so low.
Yeah, I think the number might be low just because of maybe the last game with recency bias and how they kept Travis Kelce down a little bit, which was a shock to everyone given that matchup. But I think that's the reason why
Yeah,
it's
but
down.
Kelsey's the only weapon for the Chiefs, right? That was their focus. You
Yeah.
shut down Kelsey,
Yeah.
you're going to shut down the offense. It's not if you shut down Kincaid, you're going to shut down the Bills' offense. They have Stephon Diggs, they have Gabe Davis, like they have other weapons that the Chiefs don't have.
Yeah, so I think that does help, and I think you look at these. I mean, the numbers are low enough here. The only thing we do not want when you're looking at these two numbers is Stephon Diggs to have like 17 targets, 15 catches,
Yeah.
and 160 yards because it can happen in any game, right? And sometimes they go nuts with him and get well games in this situation. But if he doesn't do that and he's held to like a modest 90 yards or something like that, then you're going to almost be guaranteed to hit that. So I like it. Investing in the Bills, a passing game there with the extra weapons against the Broncos, who I don't know what you're going to get from the Broncos. That's hard to say, but I think they're not going to be as good on the road. So I feel confident that their pass defense will fall apart. So I think I like all these picks, Michelle. So I can't argue with that. I think, look, you want to attack some of those low numbers. It's not those high numbers only. Low numbers can also give you some good return. And that's been paying off in a lot of situations this year. Okay, that's the end of the week here on Locked On Fantasy Football. So good luck in all your fantasy endeavors this week, whether you're playing in a seasonal league matchup and you need a big win ahead of the playoff stretch, or you're playing DFS and you want to smash it with one of these guys that we've talked about here, sleepers, or any of the guys that we really like with our quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end ranking. So that's all what we do here for you on Locked On Fantasy Football in 1 week. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this is Vinnie Iyer.
And I'm Michelle Magdziuk. Bye, y'all.